going on, guys, and welcome to today's video. And this video is definitely filmed outrageously out of order, but I'll kind of explain because I was hoping this fine purchase was already going to be fixed, but it is now far from being fixed. So I bought, as you guys can see from the title, the world's worst optioned Ram 1500. Now, why this is the worst? It's the V6, which isn't horrible, but when you've got a big, huge truck, you want the big Hemi engine, but it also is two-wheel drive and not four-wheel drive. Now, why I bought the world's worst optioned Ram 1500 is because I was asked if I was interested in purchasing this broken truck, and me being the, very financially smart person figured, hey, this thing could probably be fixed for cheap. It could probably be cleaned up and sold for a decent amount of profit. What could go wrong? Yeah, it went about as bad as it could possibly go. So let's do a quick walk around as much as we can for a truck that currently is getting ready to be taken apart, and then we'll talk about what's went down. So guys, I do have a front grille. Again, it is just taken apart and thrown in the bed, but this is a 2015 Ram 1500 Longhorn Edition. Now this is the Texas only Longhorn Edition, and it is the larger crew cab four-door. It does also have the better large screen instrument cluster and the big 8.4-inch radio with the 8-speed ZF transmission. That is really darn well. Now, it is decently equipped. It is just a cloth truck, but it does have the two captain's chairs in the front with the very spacious back seat due to the crew cab versus the shorter quad cab. We've got 20-inch wheels with almost like new Cooper all-terrain. So all these things made me think to myself, hey, this thing would probably clean up well. I could probably fix it for cheap and be able to fund more Jeep things, Camaro things, TRX things over in the other garage. So why not? Let's take a gamble and let's buy this thing. Now guys, the first issues that I knew the thing had was a massively leaking water pump and a leaking radiator causing the truck to overheat. The truck also had a cylinder 5 misfire, if I remember correctly. So we had kind of three separate issues, or I guess two issues. Overheating engine due to water pump and radiator leaking. Now the 3.6 liter doesn't absolutely love to be overheated. It can often either damage head gaskets or warp cylinder heads or both. It just kind of depends on how that happened. But the misfire was, something that we deal with often with rocker arms or camshaft lobe issues on the 3.6. So I excitedly ordered a water pump, a radiator, and pulled the valve covers off to kind of inspect and figure out what was going on. Now I do have a time lapse of tearing into our misfire issue. I didn't really record anything for the water pump and radiator. That's kind of straightforward. That's just bolting parts on. But I think I will throw the time lapse in now and hopefully speed it up and explain what I found causing the issue, some bad rockers, bad camshaft, etc. So time lapse video here, talking about that repair. All right guys, so we are pulling this thing apart. Now this obviously was days prior to the intro of this video, but nonetheless, we'll at least talk through tearing this thing down and at least figure out or see what I found here. So this is the big mighty 3.6 liter in the Ram 1500, which I think is one of my first times actually working on the 3.6 in the Ram platform. And let me tell you, it is not fun. This motor is very far back in the engine bay and very low. Now what we're doing here is pulling the ignition coils. We pulled our cam phaser actuators off the front of the valve cover, and we're just getting everything off of the darn valve cover to be able to actually
get to it. Now, unfortunately, on the passenger side valve cover, we have the PCV valve, which is kind of a pain to get to on most of the 3.6 liters. You've got a couple of T25 Torxes way back near the firewall that you need to basically be able to take the Torx screws out to get the PCV valve off to even get the valve cover off. So again, we're working at just getting all of the wiring, hoses, plastic clips, everything unhooked from that valve cover to be able to get down to what we need to do. Here I'm battling again with trying to get the PCV valve hose off and then finally get the two T25 Torx screws out of that PCV valve. As you can see, it's kind of a stretch here on a ram. I'm climbing over the fender, actually trying to get a hand down to this motor that is so far back in the engine bay. Now that you've got that off, you are ready to start pulling the 8mm bolts for the valve cover. Again, this thing has some shorts and some longs. Right now we're taking the cam sensor out, which is a T30 Torx. And here we are getting our deep 8mm socket so we can get all of our valve cover bolts out. Some are normal bolts and then some have big long studs on them. So again, that's where that deep 8mm comes into place. Now, I like getting a pry tool from the inside of the valve cover, and you can kind of help to lift that valve cover up. Other than prying on the mating surface, I've had good luck with that. But again, they're always very stuck on there and require a little bit of force, a little bit of wiggling, so you can actually get the valve cover lifted up and off these things. Now again, since this side is the PCV valve side, once you get the valve cover lifted, you've got to slide it rearward to be able to get it off of the oil slinger on the back there of one of the camshafts. Now again, we are removing the cams so we can get down to our rocker arms. We've got our oil control bolts off, and now we are sliding our cam phasers forward a little bit so we can get our cams loosened up. And then all of our cam cap bolts are T30 Torx, and once you've got those evenly loosened up, you can, with that cam phaser slid forward, you can get your camshaft up and out of the way, and then you can actually get down to your rockers. Now there are some special tools that hold the cam phasers. This is just kind of a general talking overview, but here is one camshaft out, and we can see that lobe is absolutely wiped off the camshaft. It should look like the lobe next to it, but it is gone. Now I'm going to show you guys a rocker. This is a failed rocker arm. The roller or needle bearings have failed in this thing, and the play, that little teeny bit of play that you can see in that rocker or the roller on that rocker is what starts the whole process and starts wiping off your camshaft lobe. Once that roller locks up and stops spinning, you lose camshaft lobes.
So guys, after all of that engine tear down or tearing into, now I only showed one side, but I went ahead and tore the other side apart and found another damaged intake camshaft. It was a rocker arm that had failed. The roller stops turning and it starts cutting into the camshaft. So there's multiple ways these can have issues. As you guys saw with that rocker, that little teeny bit of play in the roller on the rocker is enough to cause a misfire. Now this thing wasn't even causing or throwing a misfire on the cylinders that had absolutely wiped off cam lobes. That just is typically a noise and a little bit more poor runnability. So 2 camshafts and 3 damaged rocker arms on this thing. So threw all of that back together and was excited to have a fixed truck, drive it for a while, and eventually sell it. But that's when I ran into the next issue with it still getting warmer than it should have and finding a whole bunch of air in the cooling system. Even after bleeding it multiple times, I continued to have air, and yeah, that is air or combustion from the cylinders. We are pushing compression from the cylinder heads into the cooling system from either a failed head gasket or a warped cylinder head. So I then pressured up the cooling system with a cooling pressure tester, pulled out all the spark plugs, and started looking and going through each cylinder looking for coolant. After letting it sit for hours and hours with the cooling pressure tester on and pressured up, that will often push coolant into the cylinder on your affected cylinder. So I did that, and of course found coolant on not one but both banks of this engine. So both center cylinders have coolant, which means both cylinder heads get to come off. I get to check for straightness, and hopefully, pending they're straight, I get to throw new head gaskets on this thing and finally finish it and make it run, and then just start going through all the other stuff. The thing only does have 86,000 miles on it, but again, I was tempted by the fact it was relatively low miles and not in terrible shape. And again, thinking it was going to be a quick, easy fix, that's where I ended up here now in the garage, getting ready to tear this engine apart. So I think with the time lapse, this video is probably outrageously long already. So I'm probably going to call it here, and maybe the next video on this thing, I'll show some time lapse of ripping cylinder heads off. And yeah, we'll go from there and hopefully make a really poorly optioned Ram 1500 ready for the road again. And again, it will be a good vehicle for somebody. It's going to be a good truck, two-wheel drive. It'll get 20 plus miles to the gallon going down the road, and it will still be able to do truck things. Trailer hitch on the back, 4 doors, and a truck bed. That's kind of what you need. And yeah, I just got stuck with the potato here on actually taking care of it and fixing it. The guy who bailed on it was very smart. He didn't actually know the extent of how much the repairs might be. He knew worst case scenario, which is what he had happen. So he was very smart in unloading the potato to the next guy. I just happened to be the next guy and get to take a motor apart. So thanks for coming out on our first Ram truck adventure here, saving the Rams. I don't know, I've run out of WJs in the Wichita area that people don't want outrageous money for, so now I'm having to buy broken Ram trucks and try and save them. So guys, until next video with this thing, we'll hopefully a little time lapse, tearing the engine apart, putting it back together, make it run, hopefully, and yeah, so I'm gonna sweat out here in the 104-degree ambient air temp out here in the garage. And guys, as always, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys next time.